All right, welcome. And today we're going to be doing a very in-depth, comprehensive look at the Leatherman signal. We're not just going to be talking about the tool itself. We're going to be talking about tools you can pair with the Leatherman signal. We're going to talk about reasons to carry it. We're going to talk about ways you can use it that most people didn't even realize. And yeah, we're going to talk about modifications. We're going to be talking about literally everything you maybe wanted to know and maybe didn't want to know about the Leatherman signal. So if you like these ultra in-depth, ultra comprehensive reviews and discussions, this is probably your video. So stick around. It's going to be a long one, but I hope by the end you'll maybe have learned at least a little tidbit that you didn't already know. Enjoy. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk briefly about what is included on the standard Leatherman signal. Now, I want to mention that these aftermarket parts are in a different color than will come with the red and black, so don't expect that to happen if you order a red and black signal. But let's talk about what you get. So on the outside, you have two components. You have a sharpener, which is decent but not great. And then you have this component, which has both a fire steel on the back here, which is the coating is still on, and you have a whistle. Now, the one thing about this that I think is very undervalued is the whistle itself. When it comes to an actual emergency situation, a whistle may be the single most important thing you have. Other than maybe a flashlight, the whistle might be the best way in which you can affect a rescue or get somebody's attention in an emergency. I think the whistle is probably the single most underrated EDC item when it comes to emergency gear. You can only scream for a very limited amount of time, but you can blow infinitely into a whistle. And because of that, it is a very valuable true emergency tool. Now, moving on to the actual frame itself. The Leatherman Signal is the only one that has this style of clip, and it is probably the flattest and most elegant clip that is on any Leatherman. At no point does it feel uncomfortable. It's probably the most comfortable clip that is provided on the Leatherman Signal. Now, on the back end is one of the features that I find myself using quite a bit. There's a hammer, a hex bit hole that does not retain, but we'll get into that a little bit, as well as a bottle opener. And if you've ever seen somebody pull out a Leatherman to use the bottle opener, it looks so ridiculous, okay? You can't be smooth or cool opening up a Leatherman to use the inside can opener, bottle opener combo to open a bottle. This, get it in there, pop it open, no big deal. It doesn't look crazy. It's very easy to do. And that is true for both this, the skeletal, and the style CS and PS. All of them, they can open bottles from the outside very conveniently. So if you're going to do that, get one of these. Because the other ones, they look stupid trying to open a bottle with it. Okay? Just a little aside. Now, the other interesting thing about the Signal is, unlike other tools, it has a actual locking mechanism that keeps the frames together. And that is important because, unlike other tools, the ease at which this opens is much, much more. You can ballast song it open, basically. And because of that, they have to have that lock. I actually love the lock, and it's going to be an important feature in some of the other uses that I'm going to describe later on in this video. So on the inside, of course, we have a pair of pliers, which are the same as the rebar, with the wire cutters that are removable, as well as that fine needle nose. It's an excellent pair of pliers. I highly, highly recommend them. Now, we also have on the inside the bit driver, which is relatively standard, as well as the can opener, bottle opener, wire stripper combo, and the awl. Now, one thing I can tell you about the black oxide, it may appear that black oxide may be less prone to corrosion, but in fact, it's equally prone to corrosion, and the black oxide, in my opinion, just makes it harder to see. It does look, however, very, very cool. So, just something to keep in mind about that. And that is true for all tools made in 420HC. Now, what else do we got going here? So on the outside, of course, we have saw and blade, okay? And the blade here is really kind of different than some of the other tools you'll see in the Leatherman lineup. It is incredibly stout, over 3 millimeters thick, if I remember correctly. And it is, in fact, thicker than the one found on the Leatherman Surge, okay? It has a sheep's foot design, which I love quite a bit as a single blade design because it is good at draw cutting. And that is one of the number one things that I want from a utility knife, right? And this is functioning as your utility knife. It's not going to be hyper slicey. It's not going to cut apples very easily. It will do it, but it's not great. But when it comes to utility tasks, this thing rocks. So that's what it's there for. So that's my general overview of the Signal. Now, let's go into specialized cases and different uses for various different implements. All right, now we have it back together. Let's talk about using the various different implements. One thing that has always kind of irked me a little bit about the Leatherman Signal, but is doable, is the fact that when you have any of the internal implements, you cannot then close it. And there's obviously reasons for that. When you use the bit driver, you're going to actually have to lock one side in and then hold as you see here. So you'll hold it, let me zoom out a little bit. So you'll hold it like so, and you'll be able to screw it in from there. I do not recommend doing it this way as much. I have found that I get a little pinch right here, so this is just a little user tip. Have the pliers arrested under your hands when you're using this. You'll find that this is much more comfortable, and when you choke up is going to keep you from getting pinched between the pliers and the frame. Just one small tip there. All right, now let's talk quickly about the awl. Now the awl is kind of an interesting tool, and it's one of the few things that I think is missing from the Leatherman Wave, which I think I'm very happy to have in the Signal. One thing that I find particularly interesting is because it's on the outside of the section that is normally in, say, a Wave or something like that, it actually sits next to the hammer. And if you can see, there's already a cutout for it, so it was designed to do this. And when you lock it, now you have a excellent point to be able to drill with, and you'll get all the way up to there without needing to open up the frame. The other cool thing, just something fun, is you can open up both the blade and that, and then you have sort of a pseudo-tactical, weird-looking thing going on. And for those people who this floats their boat, there you go. Have a good one. Okay, what's next? Now, let's go ahead and talk about ways to use things that were not necessarily meant to be used. The first one we're going to talk about is the hex bit driver that is built into the hammer. As you can see, it does not have particular retention, but that can be fixed. And let's go ahead and show how that is done. Okay, what we have here is a paracord. It's very familiar, I'm sure, to most people. But inside the paracord is a series of strands. Now, if we take a single one of these strands, we're just going to go ahead and pull out some of this. We'll cut it up. Okay, what we have is now a bunch of different strands of inner paracord. We're going to take one of these strands and we're going to use it to actually create retention inside that hole. The way we're going to do that, and now there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can do it with a thicker piece of cordage where you don't double it up, but in this case we're going to go ahead and do that. So first thing I'm going to do with the paracord, and I've shown this in the past, but I just want to go reiterate it in a YouTube video, is go ahead and make a loop for it. This will make this whole thing removable. All right, and you're going to go ahead and set it up just like so. And this is very, very simple. You just thread it through, which I'm trying to do through a viewfinder, and stick it through the loop. Okay. Why am I trying to do this through a viewfinder? There we go. Now, I do recommend bringing it all the way into the carabiner area, like so. And if you were to leave it as is, I would just go ahead and make a double loop and tie it off. So you probably will never even notice it. But for the sake of this video, I want to be able to remove it, and I want to be able, if I was going to do it, I would probably make some sort of dark string so that I couldn't see it normally. It would just be unsightly. So now what we have this, we can go ahead and we can actually insert some hex bits and they'll actually retain. Okay, so here we have a bit extender. Now in a normal case this would just fall right out, but now that we have that piece of string, what we do when it happens is it compresses the string as you put it in, and now you no longer have it falling out. Okay, same thing is going to be true for the hex bits themselves, so this will retain. Where this is particularly useful, if you had to reach up high and you couldn't hold the bit in, you now have this bit completely arrested inside the frame. And if you needed to put a lot of torque on something, this may be a good idea. This is pretty strong, so if you wanted to say set this up with some sockets, I would imagine that you could do some reasonable amount of work. Do not try to open it up like so and then try to torque on it from, no, that's not going to work. However, I will say that for adding a lot more leverage, this is pretty good. And being able to get retention out of the hex bits, I think it should have been a no-brainer from the first place with Leatherman, but I don't blame them for not including this feature to begin with. This is a very easy thing for you to do. It costs practically nothing, and it dramatically enhances the Leatherman signal and its functionality. Okay, one thing that's also missing from the Leatherman signal is a small, the small micro driver. Now, there is a number of reasons to carry the Leatherman signal, and I'm going to actually address that at the very end of this video. But one of the biggest downsides is that it doesn't have the micro bit screwdriver, but there is a way to actually utilize it without making any modifications to your tool. So we're going to go ahead and show you that. So this is the micro bit driver that you can find on the Wave or the Charge, and if you take this out, there's a little bit of a trick here. Now if you look down at the top, let me zoom in just a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. There's a section with the two sides come together and where the plier comes together. And believe it or not, without actually doing too much work, you will actually be able to fit it directly into that slot. There's a small space. You may have to pull the pliers apart slightly. Oh, I forgot, I gotta lock it. It's kind of important. So you keep it locked, and you'll actually be able to slot this in. And you will angle it, and you will find the slot. Once you do, it will stay in its fixed orientation. The pressure, you can put pressure on it and twist it, and it will stay in place. Now, it's not the most secure thing. You can push it in a little further and it will stay there, but it works, and it works pretty well. It's also in line with the very center of the tool, so you'll be able to use it properly. All you're going to need to do is be able to fit it inside the bit kit, and you will have, in fact, a place to be able to use it. This is actually a huge advantage to having the lock, because even when I'm not pressing, it's holding that bit in place inside the signal. So this will give you access to the microbit driver in actually a very nice orientation, in fact. And you don't have to have that driver section that's built into something like the Leatherman Charge. Anyone who has spent any amount of time with me on my channel or on my Instagram has seen how much I like to modify my tools, because I really don't think life is long enough to spend with tools that aren't going to accomplish your task. So there are modifications available for the Leatherman signal. It's two of which are great because they do not require any compromise of the warranty, which is worth a lot, is these add-ons that are 3D printed by Metrograde's goods. Now both of these allow you to carry additional bits. Okay, so you can get 2 additional bits inside the Leatherman signal, and this of course replaces the whistle and ferrocerium rod, and this replaces the sharpener. Now I actually prefer the whistle now that I've played with it a little bit, but I also prefer this over the the sharpener section, especially because I usually keep a diamond file on my key chain setup. So for me, this in particular works really well and gives me access to a second bit inside the Leatherman signal. That's 2 additional functions. So maybe I keep the T8, T10, or something along those lines that I want to use regularly. If I have another knife that I'm trying to maintain, it's a really good idea. So there you go. That's one modification, but there are many more available for the Leatherman signal. But because of these modular components, there are available modifications that will not affect your warranty. Those are the ones I recommend to most people, and those are the ones I think you should check out. So this one is made by Metric Grades Goods. I will go ahead and put a link in the description to this particular setup. All right, let's talk about pairings for just a second. So no multi-tool is going to do it all, and usually if it does it all, it doesn't do it well, and if it does have it all, it's probably freaking massive. So one of the best parts about the Leatherman signal is that it is very compact, but it does pair particularly well with tools, especially those that contain scissors. One of those tools that pairs very well is the Leatherman Style CS. It is also made by Leatherman, has their excellent warranty, and has a set of tools that are particularly complementary. It has a diamond file for your nails. It has a large pair of scissors, and with small modifications can do far more. So one thing that we know we have with the signal is we have a bit driver, and one thing that you can do with the Style series specifically is you can modify them to hold a Leatherman bit in the back, very nicely retained, and now you have access to a secondary pair of drivers, right? And that can come in handy because you can sometimes have to come at something from 2 sides, and you need 2 different ways to arrest them, whether it's a plier and a driver, and not being able to separate them can come up, and having a second driver is really important. So for me, the Style CS or PS are particularly good, but the CS definitely is really good for this because of the larger scissors, which can, in theory, be as good as something like the Surge scissor, I think, with the proper sharpening. The other complementary tools that really come to mind, and you can extrapolate this to other implements that are similar, and all of the ones I'm going to recommend are keychain tools, are something like the Victorinox Manager. And I like the Manager a little better than Rambler because it has that pressurized pen insert as well as the tweezer. And the tweezer is definitely a different set of functions than the pliers on the Leatherman signal. And so that's really good. There's also just so you know, if you didn't know, the Leatherman CS Style CS has a tweezer as well. So keychain tool with a pair of scissors is going to be a perfect complement to a Leatherman signal. Why should you have them separate instead of inside the tool? The thing about the Leatherman signal is with how compact it really is, it is much more comfortable to carry inside your pocket. It's why I think that this tool is really meant for EDC versus what it was originally marketed for. So if you're ready, we'll go to the next section. We'll talk about why you should carry the Leatherman signal. And yeah, and we'll talk about it then. Okay, maybe I should have put this at the beginning, but here we are. Why should you carry the Leatherman signal over something like the Leatherman Charge or any other particular implement? Well, first of all, this is one of the very few multi-tools that is available on the market that gives you access to all 3 major hand tool functions. That is including things that can shape, aka a hammer. You have things that can grab, aka the plier, and you can have things that can separate, cut, which is both the saw and you have the blade. Okay, there is no hammer on the Leatherman Charge, and I do not recommend trying it. Okay, so that is built into the functionality, but it's also quite light at 7.6 ounces, and it is very thin. Thin tools are particularly important when you're talking about everyday carry because you don't want them to be bulging in your pockets. You want them to be discreet, comfortable to carry. And this particular tool is good at that particular function. Now, why do I not think this is a good camp tool? It's not really a great camp tool because the one area that is very important when you're talking about a outdoorsman's tool is you're going to be working at length for a period of time on something, and you want ergonomics to be up front and as good as they can be. And the thing about the Signal is it is not the most ergonomic Leatherman out there by any stretch of the imagination. Is it a great survival tool? Yeah. And where I think survival implements like the ferrocerium rod and whistle come into play are when you don't think you're going to have them on hand versus when you might always carry them. If you're going out in the wild, you might consider carrying a lighter. You might consider carrying a compass. You might consider carrying a lot of these tools that are not present in your mind on a day-to-day basis. But because the Leatherman Signal has those functions and they don't impede any other aspect of the tool, it is particularly good for everyday carry. And so for that reason, I do highly recommend this tool, even though some of the aspects of it are a little cumbersome, such as using the bit driver and having to keep it open fully, in long length when you're trying to use it. So when you want to use the bit driver, you have to hold it like that. Yeah, I get that that's a little bit of a hassle, but it is a very, very compact tool. And for me, I find that I mostly use the knife. I use the pliers, which is very easy to access because of that balancing function, and I use the hammer a lot. Actually, I use the hammer quite a bit, and I didn't expect that, but I do. And those three functions are very quick to use, very easy to access. And that's great. That's excellent. So for me, the Leatherman Signal is fantastic. I use it as a utility knife. I'm not out trying to slice tomatoes really thin or anything crazy. So the thick, stout blade with that, I think this is what, a saber grind? I don't know. You'll have to correct me on that one. But that utility blade shape with the serrations, it works for the functions I need it to on a day-to-day basis. It's certainly not going to be as good for carving as something like the straight blade on the Charge or any of the internal implement versions, the ST300 or the Rebar or the Swiss tool or the Spirit or that kind of thing. So for those outdoor tools, they have their place. This one is really particularly good at EDC because it is small and compact, yet packs all these functionalities for emergency scenarios that you may not have seen coming. For that reason, I think it's particularly good. And that's why I wanted to just have this quick discussion and maybe make you guys aware of other things that you can do with this tool, such as locking bits and so on and so forth. So I hope this was enjoyable. I hope you learned something. If you know something about this tool that I don't know, please tell me. Please tell me, because it's something I can then pass on to others. I hope if you liked it and you're still watching this, that you will subscribe. I'll be having much more of these in the future, talking about different multi-tools, especially as I condense my collection. And I'm going to want to make sure to have video storage of those items before I get rid of them. So you have a good one, guys.